Congratulations on your Davos issue. A decade of global thinkers. Let me put it up here right now. It is a usual Davos rag, but it's got a wonderful energy. I'll go to Fareed Zakaria with the Post-American World as he talks about the end of economics. Are we at the end of foreign policy with the chaos that's out there?
No, I don't think so. It's a bizarre time for foreign policy analysts in the sense that the traditional playbook doesn't work anymore. In the old days, there's a very clear template for how you wrote a foreign policy article. You talked about what should be done, and then you talked about what the administration is likely to do, and there was a close alignment between the two. Now, of course, we have an administration that rejects experts and rejects advice and is totally unpredictable. So the template of how you write a foreign policy article has to completely change. You talk about what should happen, but then you have to talk about what on earth...
What is actually happening.
Exactly. The Trump administration is likely to do, and if there's any way to reconcile the best practice with what's actually going to happen.
My book of the summer was The Return of Marco Polo's World, Robert Kagan's wonderful sum up of the South China Sea, and you see John Mearsheimer at Chicago publishing now. What is the state, excuse me, Robert Kaplan, what is the state right now of the realist philosophy, that hard-knuckled Kissingerian policy within your world? I mean, do the realists reign?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the realists are having a hard time because, on the one hand, they don't want to embrace Trump. On the other hand, a lot of the things that they're doing are consistent, or superficially at least, consistent with realism in the sense of withdrawing the U.S. from foreign adventures like Syria, questioning U.S. alliance and troop engagements around the world. At the same time, what smart realists will argue is that...
I like that phrase.
Thank you. While the U.S. needs to do everything it can to marshal its forces and not get involved in foreign fights that aren't its business, it should be using these other force multipliers like alliance systems, like treaties, like international institutions that Trump has spurned as well. So what you're getting, if that's smart realism, what Trump is giving us is a dumb realism where we withdraw but we don't put anything in its place.
Right. What's China's foreign policy for 2019? And we focus so much on the U.S.-China relationship, maybe we tend to forget China's foreign policy with the Koreas.
Right. I mean, China's in a very tough spot right now because it's getting pushed back on all sorts of fronts. Its big Belt and Road initiative, this infrastructure plan that was going to tie the whole world to China, is looking a lot less good than it is today because of the way that China has struck deals with many of its partners, which have turned out to be quite rapacious and beneficial for the Chinese, but not for the local partners. So they're pushing back. The Chinese economy is slowing. The Trump administration is hitting them very, very hard on trade, and the Chinese are proving less resilient to U.S. tariffs.
So what do they do? I mean, is there a new alliance with Russia?
Well, the alliance with Russia isn't new, but it is always and will always be a limited alliance because Chinese and Russian interests are not aligned except in a very few areas. And one of them is pushing back against the United States. But beyond that, they don't have that much in common. What the Chinese will do, I think, is actually return to what Chinese policy was under Hu Jintao, although not calling it, which is a much more restrained policy, picking far fewer battles than in the past.
Within foreign policy, let me bring up here our single best chart now, which shows that vector of Chinese GDP growth. We showed this yesterday. There's really no other chart at Davos right now, but the migration down sub 7% on Chinese GDP. For Jonathan Tepperman, we do log GDP just to dazzle him with the Bloomberg abilities here. Douglas Irwin weighs in on page 62, the giant of Dartmouth College, and he says, here's what to watch for from President Trump. What is Jonathan Tepperman going to watch for in a new American foreign policy?
Well, on trade, certainly, I think Irwin gets it exactly right, which is the question right now is Trump actually a free trader, or is he an anarchist or nihilist who just wants to blow up the system and put nothing in its place? And the question, I think, there, or the answer will be whether we strike a trade deal with China or not. Because if you talk to, and the reason this is so hard to figure out is if you talk to people in the White House, you get two different sets of answers. There are people who say, yeah, we want a new fair trade deal. But then there are others who say, we don't want a deal because we want to decouple the U.S. economy from the Chinese one.